Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today's episode focuses all on divorcing somebody who has narcissistic personality disorder or going through a high conflict divorce. We're going to dive into the family court system. We're going to look at the alienation claims. We're going to look at reunification camps. And who best to talk to us about that but the amazing Tina Swithin. Tina Swithin is the author of the book series Divorcing a Narcissist, blogger at One Mom's Battle, which I highly recommend you check out, and founder of the High Conflict Divorce Coach Certification Program. Tina champions children's rights through legislative change and awareness campaigns. She's done so much work, and I always say she is saving lives. She is a force. Tina's current advocacy efforts are focused on banning reunification camps and other experimental treatment programs, which are often ordered by family court judges in private custody proceedings. Tina resides in California with her husband and 2 daughters. Also, she just published her second children's book and just passed legislation in Arizona to prohibit judges from ordering reunification camps, which is huge. You're going to thoroughly enjoy this episode. It is just a wealth of information. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. My guest today is the amazingly talented, wonderful, smart, she knows I adore her, Tina Swithin. Tina, I'm just going to jump right in because I know so many people have so many questions that they want answered, and who better to do it than you? So for the people listening, things we're going to discuss today really have to do with family court and the dangers in particular of family court that you may or may not be aware of, strategies that you can use, things to look out for, how to educate people around you, because as much as we would hope that everybody in family court is educated properly, they're not, and sometimes don't want to be, which is a whole other issue. So we'll get into family court. I want to make sure we talk about the alienation industry, what that really is and what that means and why it's so dangerous, reunification camps, and kind of what the current status is, because there's been a lot of really positive headway in terms of that. There's still so much that has to be done, but Tina has done an amazing job of just basically saving lives is the best way I can put it with this. So Tina, I'm just going to jump right in. Why is even discussing family court something that we think would be in the favor of, domestic violence survivors? Why is this so important? What's going on?
What is happening behind closed doors of the family court system would horrify everyone in the country, around the world, if they truly knew. And so many of us walk into the family court system, myself included, just believing that everyone is there to protect kids, that is our mutual goal. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening. And so, in my opinion, the first step towards change is awareness on these topics. And we need to be talking about it because there are so many survivors of domestic violence who believe the messaging from society that, just be brave, leave. And then they assume that once they step foot into the family court system, that they are going to be protected and that their children are going to be protected. And that's absolutely not what's happening.
Mm-hmm. And it is so jarring, right? And I know you hear stories all the time about this. And just when you think you have heard the most horrific thing, it's just one more. And, like I said, you're making tremendous headway in terms of educating people and changing laws and, really kind of blowing up people that are so embedded in this system, because it is a system. So talk to us a little bit about what can happen in family court and more importantly, why and how it's allowed.
I think that, it is working the way it was designed. A lot of people say it's broken. It's like, no, it's doing what it was designed to do. it has become an industrial complex. It has become an incredibly lucrative industry where there's a lot of it attracts a lot of very unscrupulous professionals in air quotes, who are not there for the right reasons. They're there for profit. And it is, it should be what is in the child's best interest. But what has happened is it becomes about parental rights. And there are many times where a parent doesn't deserve a seat at the table. If they can cause so much harm and damage to a child, they just shouldn't be there. But this industry has really come up because of that notion or that theory that kids need two parents to thrive. And it's very much the father's rights movement that
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Because it's interesting, because you would think that something pushed so deliberately, right, within the family court system, that it would abide by the research, when in fact the research shows the complete opposite, that all you need, and I'm not making this up, it's not even anecdotal, this is what the research says, all you need is one healthy parent to raise a healthy child. That's it. And we know this. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people stay before the kids, for the kids. And I get that as a parent. I get that as a psychologist. I get that. But the problem with that is it also keeps them and you as the parent within the abusive cycle. So it's with good intentions, but I think it takes a little bit of pressure off people when they hear that it is a fact that you need one stable parent. Can you discuss, when you say that there is financial gain, that it's an industry? Can you talk about specifically what that means? How are people profiting, and what are they profiting off of?
So there, it starts with the attorneys. It starts with it is not their goal to come to a resolution for the majority of them. There are some good attorneys out there, just like in any industry. However, this one is highly profitable. And so, if you were to take, you don't want to take attorneys completely out of the mix, but if you capped how much could be made on a case, I guarantee we would get to resolution a lot faster than we do.
That is correct.
They are fanning the flames. They are behind the scenes. I see so many cases where I look at it and they're spending the most money, in my opinion, is spent negotiating behind the scenes. And when you are dealing with a narcissist or a high conflict individual, they are thriving in this realm, and they are fed by the conflict. And so negotiating behind the scenes, it's like negotiating with a terrorist. You can't.
It's their stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so there's no positive outcome. People are bankrupted emotionally, psychologically, financially. This is set up to fail. The only people who are incentivized and who are winning in this are the family law professionals. And from the attorneys, then you have the other professionals, because there's almost this, I call it the a la carte menu that judges have. And when they don't have the ability to determine what the issues are, because this is horrifying to most people to discover that family court judges have zero training in domestic abuse, and not even the 101 version of domestic abuse.
I remember when I first got into this, and that one fact blew my mind. I remember, I remember, and this is just, I remember, like, what, and the equivalent of that is like going to your dentist to have open heart surgery. I mean, could the dentist talk to you about your cardiac conditions? Of course. Should they? Probably not. Should they do the actual surgery? Absolutely not. That blew my mind. So not only are you dealing with a corrupt system, but you're also, and this is not all judges, obviously, but you're also dealing with judges who not only are they not familiar with the ins and outs of the family court, but they're also not trained in any way, shape, or form with any type of domestic violence or narcissistic abuse, which is a whole subset of domestic violence, which is a whole other animal altogether. That blew my mind. And I remember getting a pit in my stomach because it's such a hopeless, helpless feeling. Because not only are you trying to get custody of your children, but you're also trying to convince people that are in the positions that they're in to not do what's in the child's best interest. It's like a no-win situation, and the helplessness is pretty brutal.
Yeah, and you have a whole scale of judges going from the ones who may be good people, but they're just
Yes.
uneducated, to the ones who are absolutely colluding, corrupt, or who so closely identify to the narcissistic individual because that's who they are. So they can't recognize the problems because it feels so familiar. And so these judges they have no idea what to do, a lot of them. And so they're just going through this a la carte menu of, we're going to order a psych eval, we're going to order a custody evaluation, or assign a guardian ad litem for the children, an attorney for the kids. And you just get deeper and deeper into the collusion, because when you start branching out to those professionals, a lot of them, all of them, are financially motivated by the conflict. And you've got a lot of corruption in that, and professionals who are working together in rings. I ask people often, when I see a case out of a certain area that I know to be more corrupt, I'll ask, who are the professionals on your case? And you can usually connect the dots on several other cases, and we'll see change when people start coming together and holding these professionals accountable.
I remember for the Kasanoff, Catherine Kasanoff. Okay, so for those of you, am I saying that right? Kasanoff, right? Catherine Kasanoff. Catherine Kasanoff, for those of you listening, do a Google search if you're not familiar with this, but that is a perfect example of what we're talking about. That, and I remember doing a realness, and I absolutely just went off about this. The professionals that they called in, this, and I did the air quotes, the psychologist that they called in, it was beyond upsetting. It was so unethical in every way possible, that the fact that there are psychologists out there who engaged in this type of behavior, it was absolutely infuriating. And I will speak for the whole profession when I say that. These were people that were paid a lot of money. He spent millions of dollars. And the reports that were made were not only bogus, but they were deliberately tailored to make her look, quote, crazy. And that's, for those listening, that's what Tina's talking about, is that it's this collusion to really benefit the abusive parent by making, usually the woman, but not always, making the woman look, quote, unfit.
Yeah.
And broke. They can't fight back.
Absolutely. They drain you financially to the point that women are bankrupt, women are homeless, and if you take any of these known professionals who are colluding or corrupt, and you look at their templates, you start laying out different psych evals, different custody evaluations from different people. It's a template. They just insert different names, and it's all to go towards their bias, their agenda, which is financially motivated, and a lot of it leaning towards the father's rights. And it's predictable, sadly.
It's predictable. So let's talk a little bit about father's rights movement. And, before people listening think we're father bashing, we are not. But the father's rights movement kind of grew out of a very toxic and unhealthy kind of place, let's say. I'm putting that very nicely, which brings in the whole concept of the alienation industry. So if we could talk about kind of what the father's rights movement is, what it is, why it's dangerous, and then kind of lead into alienation, because I think the concept of alienation confuses a lot of people as far as the term itself.
Right. And I want to start this off by saying I was raised by my dad. My dad was the healthier of my two parents. I am grateful for that. He got custody when I was 6 months old, and he raised me my entire life. So I am very pro healthy dad. I'm pro healthy mom, but at the end of the day, for me, it's about the kids, and um, the fathers' rights movement can be traced back to the 1980s when the child support system was created and solidified. And when there was accountability financially that men were being held, and sometimes women, to um, financially provide for their kids, this entire movement started surrounding that. And it has grown from there. It is disturbing because a lot of the main players in that fathers' rights movement are some of the scariest individuals I have come up against. And when you start going, you and I are both, we go down rabbit holes.
Tina and I go down rabbit holes at 3 a.m. and just send each other things.
Yes,
on the
but
side.
you have to. The people who are behind these extreme movements are typically very concerning, abusive, dysfunctional, toxic, narcissistic themselves.
Very.
So when that is the foundation, the platform for a movement, that should scare everyone.
And I think it's important to say that it came out of such an unhealthy place, because if you think about it, if we take a step back and we just look at all of this objectively, no healthy parent would ever refuse to financially provide for their children if they could. Period. End of story. And if they decide not to provide financially for their child when they can, it's because they're using their child as a pawn to get back at the spouse. That's it, and that's all. Because no healthy parent, doesn't matter how toxic the marriage is, no healthy parent, first of all, is going to be abusive, but no healthy parent is going to purposely and willingly not support their child.
Right. And
there's something inherently wrong with that.
Yes, and set out to use a system to destroy the mother of their children.
Yes.
And to completely turn their child's lives upside down, because in the majority of these situations, mom was the primary caregiver, the only, primary attachment figure that these children knew.
Yes.
And so who would do that to it? I don't know any healthy dads who would say, because I'm entitled to 50% of this child, I'm going to turn their lives upside down. No healthy parent would do that.
No. If somebody told me, this is totally illogical, but if somebody told me that me raising my children would ultimately result in, for whatever reason, in their, I don't know, poor health or mental state, and that somehow it was going to really, and I would not raise that. Right? Like I know that makes no sense, but really at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's an unwillingness to put your child's health, mental and physical, first, just because you don't want to take accountability, you're entitled, and you want to punish your ex.
Yeah.
No healthy parent does that. Yeah. Yeah. So talk a little bit. So I get a lot of times, I'll talk about how, and I'll post this and you'll post about alienation and alienation constructs and concepts. And I get a ton of pushback, not because people disagree, but people don't understand what alienation really means. Because I'll have, people say, no, that's not true. My ex alienated the kids from me. He or she made them hate me, told them lies about me. And they think that I'm invalidating that's not what's happening, when that's not what I'm saying at all. Actually, that's more of coercive control and coercive tactics. Can you talk a little bit about the actual term parental alienation, where it came from, and why it's something that as a term should not be used?
Right. Around the same time that the child support system, was created and the fathers' rights movement bloomed from that, there was a man by the name of Richard Gardner who concocted a theory that mothers are setting out and coaching their children, turning their children against the father. And usually in those cases, there were accusations that the father was sexually abusing the children. And so it was created as a legal strategy for men who were sexually abusing their children. And it really gained momentum in the Woody Allen Mia Farrow case with Dylan Farrow. And now we know the reality of what that case was. It took off, it grew with the fathers' rights movement and became the number one legal strategy that they used in different types of abuse. And it is a way that they turn the tables on the victim. So any allegation of abuse is met with alienation. It's the inability to take accountability for why the children don't have a relationship or a bond with this person who is probably incapable of creating a true bond with the child. That's why it doesn't exist. But
right.
To this day,
right.
It has become the number one legal strategy of abusers. And so to talk about your question, there are parents who are absolutely turning children against the healthy parent. That is valid. These are some of the most heart-wrenching stories. You and I are both moms. If my children rejected me, I cannot imagine anything more painful.
No,
and
nothing.
When you can clearly see that they are being used as pawns. With that said, when we use the term alienation to describe what's happening, we are propelling the fathers' rights movement forward, and we are bolstering the enemy. And the reason why our cases and our court system is the way it is, we are helping them. And I guarantee you, because I belong to a lot of these groups, I'm a mole in a lot of these groups where
I love it. You don't mess with Tina Swithin.
Right. And they give playbooks on how to do it when abuse allegations are raised. And so they are laughing the professionals are laughing all the way to the bank when they get moms who are using this terminology because it's helping them. And so I say, I protected my children because my ex was a narcissist, but I never used that word once in court. I knew better. But I showed patterns of behavior and documented everything. It's the same concept. If you show what this person is doing to the children without using that word, it can be just as effective and actually more effective, because a lot of judges have caught on to this legal strategy of alienation. And I know judges where I'm sitting in their courtroom and someone throws that word out and they're doing a mental eye roll because they know the origins. And so it can actually hurt your case.
Hurt you.
Use that word.
Very good. And, and for people listening, again, it goes back to what healthy parent deliberately turns their child against against the other parent. That logically doesn't make sense. I don't care how, whatever happens in a marriage, you put your children first. It may kill you to have them stay at your ex's house because you miss them and you hate the situation, but you would never deliberately withhold that connection or that bond or to foster that unless clearly unless there was abuse, unless there was maltreatment. But in a healthy situation, I mean, no healthy parent does that. Why? What do they benefit with, to break that bonds between the child and the parent, right? If there's nothing unhealthy about it, it's cruel. And so a healthy parent, I mean, for me to deliberately limit or completely withhold my children's interaction from their father just because I'm going to punish him. I mean, no one does that unless you're unhealthy, which is the entire point of all this. So the other thing too that I want people to know, just to know how vile this is, can you kind of give a little bit of history on Richard Gardner's research that is easily you can Google it. We're not making this up, so hold on to your seat. But can you talk a little bit about his former research?
His entire platform is based on his belief that as a society, we are too punitive against adults who are having sexual relations with children.
Yes, you heard that correctly.
Yeah, he believes that children seduce adults, young children, and that if you follow back other cultures of other civilizations, that it was normalized and that is what we need to do. And so while I've never directly heard that this man has sexually abused a child, one has to wonder if somebody's entire belief system, and then from that, this industry, I call it the alienation industry, has grown from that. And many of these uh, profiteers, I call reunification profiteers, are using still going back, and some of them try to distance themselves and recreate a new platform, but it's all the same. It is all highly disturbing.
And I like how you say, because it's true. You do enough of a search, right? You go down enough rabbit holes, every single person is connected. It is so disturbing and upsetting. Before we get into reunification camps, because you said that, I definitely want to talk about that and what they are and how we can prevent them from even being addressed and what people can do so that doesn't happen. The documentary, and I'm blanking on the name of it. I watched it maybe 2 months ago about the kids. What was the name of that again? Do you remember
Um,
offhand?
I don't. I can send it
Hell
to.
Camp or Hell Camp or
Oh,
Camp Hell or
I
something?
know what you're talking about. That was the Netflix one, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. It's
I did
pretty
watch
recent.
that one. Okay.
Okay. If you want an idea of what reunification camp, it's not identical to that, but it's the same concept. It's the same profiting. It's the same sick, very just diseased system. Watch it. I can also link it to this, just so people, trigger warning, please, obviously, but it really shows you how corrupt the system is and how the children are the furthest thing from the priority. It's and how uneducated, not to their own, well, say that cautiously, in the beginning, maybe not to their own fault, the parents and the lack of education they have about these camps. Now, once they hear or once they see, when they turn a blind eye, that's a whole different story. But this is why it's so important to have the education, because there is no way you would ever, as a parent, think that this is what's happening and what's going on. The abuse and the sexual abuse and the physical abuse and the violence and the corruption that occurs at these camps. So let's get into that. Explain for people who are listening and what reunification camps are, how they came to be, and then we'll get into how we can kind of prevent them from. And I also want to talk about the work you've done in terms of kind of blowing them up.
Yeah. So they also have a very disturbing history. It can be traced back to one of the most notorious criminal violent cults in the United States, the Synanon cult. And some of the individuals from that cult, when the cult was shut down, branched off and created the first reunification camp. And it involves a lot of the same things that you're talking about with the documentary, a lot of the same players actually from the wilderness camps and the troubled teen industry. There's a lot of crossover. They use the same transport agents. Um, the kids are threatened to be sent to wilderness camps if they don't comply. So yeah, it's all of the same industry.
Can you talk about why reunification camps are even introduced and what the quote purpose of them is? And then I want to kind of get into the just corrupt loopholes. You said the transport system. I want to get into that so people are educated about that. But why are reunification camps even introduced? What's the purpose of them, or the intended purpose? Or
So the industry that has been created around the thought that two parents are absolutely critical to a child, they've created their own industry, reunification industry, alienation industry. It is, I will say, it's, by the time I retire, I hope it's exposed. It will go down in history as the biggest multi-level marketing scheme of our lifetime. There are different stages of it. It starts with trying to force the kids into a relationship with the abusive parent or the parent they've rejected, and they
Through the courts.
through the courts. The courts order this because they bring in these experts to testify that the children will be irreparably harmed if they don't have a relationship with their abuser. And I am saying some of these cases involve proven sexual abuse, proven physical abuse, all of it. And so then the courts order reunification therapy. That's where it starts. And we know that won't be successful. And I should say, the only families that are targeted for this are middle class to wealthy. It is very apparently lower middle class people do not educate or do not turn their children against the
Isn't that interesting?
It is so interesting.
Isn't that?
So, it is a very targeted group of people because you have to have the financial resources to pay for these outrageous bills. So the kids are sent
How much are we talking, Tina?
I've heard with the camp, with the pre-care, the aftercare, I've heard of parents spending over $1 million in 3 years. But I would say 100,000 would be a minimal for the first year. And I've also heard of stories where people are ordered to cash out their retirement accounts. There's a story out of Northern Oregon, I believe, where a child's college education 529 account was ordered to be cashed out to pay for this. So that is how deeply corrupt it is. So the courts order reunification therapy. We know that you cannot force a relationship or a bond between two people. So it's already going to fail. Predictable.
And how scary for the child and the messages that they're getting that the legal system is forcing you to have a relationship with your abuser.
And that the air quote experts that they bring in to testify are the ones financially profiting off of these. They're literally turning children into revenue streams. And so they're testifying about how detrimental it is if the child doesn't have this relationship. So when reunification therapy fails, and we know it will, then the reunification therapist stamps the case as severely alienated, and the kids are often recommended to go to these 4-day intensive camps.
Can we talk about what these 4-day intensive camps look like and what they are perceived to be versus what they actually really are?
Well, we should start by saying that the people who run the camps even admit that these are experimental. So we are utilizing children as guinea pigs for this profit industry. Insurance doesn't pay for it because it's not recognized by the mental health profession as a legitimate treatment. And so the kids arrive, and it's not a camp like you would imagine. A lot of times they're done out of Airbnbs, hotel suites. There are a couple of physical camps. There's one in California. There's one in Texas, New York, and I believe also Florida has one. The kids arrive on day one. They're told that whatever.
Can I back you up a step? Can we talk about how they get there?
Yes. Transport agents are utilized in the majority of these cases. First, they try to get the kids to go willingly, but they're not going willingly. They're coerced and they're threatened that if you don't, you could be sent to a wilderness camp. You're going to have to beg for a blanket or for food. And so they scare these kids so badly that if you don't go willingly, all of these other things are going to happen. So some kids do comply and go because they're scared out of their minds. If the child is resistant, they bring in transport agents, and these are hired individuals who commonly take people against their will psych holds or to drug rehabilitation centers. Some of the videos that we've seen of children being taken to these camps are haunting. I have nightmares still. Kids who are physically restrained, almost hogtied. We've seen the video of Maya and Sebastian Lang out of California. Her clothes were being pulled off. Her face was hit into a car door.
And these are big men.
Big
men.
Yes.
And
Terrifying.
it is scary. And you have big men carrying you to your abuser, forcing you into a car, on an airplane, going somewhere you have no idea. And the healthy parent also is not informed of where their child is. So it's, I mean, we're talking about it. I know people are listening like, that doesn't happen. Oh, it does all the time. And it's so upsetting. So one of the questions I remember that I had asked you when I was learning about this transport aspect of this is, how is that not deemed kidnapping?
Right. Or human trafficking, because
or human trafficking. Yep.
Yeah, because sometimes they're taking them across state lines.
That's right.
There's a transfer of guardianship at each step. So the original court order gives guardianship to the transport agents. So they now have custody of the children until they get to the reunification camp, and then custody is transferred to the owner of the reunification camp. So that's how we actually had an attorney who was so incensed about this, and she specializes in human trafficking, and she wanted to make a case. They have found loopholes, they have found ways around it, so it's not, it is, but it's not legally considered human trafficking.
That's right. And here's the other thing. I mean, this, not that this is a legal statement at all, but at the end of the day, if you really need to go through that many loopholes, something's wrong.
Right. Something is wrong. Absolutely.
Something's wrong.
Absolutely.
So I cut you off. Okay. So they're transported, they get to this quote camp, which could be some random hotel, with grown adults coming in and out of the rooms to give them quote evaluations. There's my air quotes for those of you who are not watching. Talk a little bit about what the reunification process actually looks like.
They're told pretty much day one, day two, that whatever has happened in the past does not matter, even if that is substantiated abuse, that we are in the here and now, we're only focused on forward movement. And so you're not allowed to talk about your past abuse or grievances against this person. Then they have the abusive parent bring in photographs, videos of happier times, to show the kids that at one point they did have a relationship. Well, we all know that abusive people are not beating their children on camera. They are posing. I know in my own experience, and I was accused of alienation by my ex-husband. The biggest source of contention in our relationship was that he had no bond with the kids unless a camera was on. So I was always the one behind the lens saying, smile. And so are there happy pictures? Yes, absolutely. Kids are happy in Disneyland amusement parks. So the unhealthy parent brings in all of these. It's gaslighting. You are gaslighting these children into believing that their reality is not true. And when they try to voice anything, they're shut down by these alienation or reunification camp owners who don't allow them to talk. And these camp owners even brag online about disempowering children, that is their goal, is to take away their power, which that is sick in itself. And then they day 3, day 4, they usually send them out on outings to museums, amusement parks, and get all kinds of happy pictures of the kids. The kids are told they have to smile, and all the while, if the kids aren't complying with the program, they're told that, first of all, they're told that you can't see your healthy or preferred parent for 90 days minimum. And every time you step out of line, that clock resets. So these kids are smiling in the pictures because they want to get through this 90-day no contact period so they can get back to their healthy parent. However, we know it's never 90 days.
That's right.
It's typically a year minimum. So at the end of the camp, what they deem the camp owners deem as successful is if the child is talking to the abusive parent. They're forced to talk to the abusive parent. So that's why these individuals sit on the stand and testify under oath that their camps are 96% effective, 100% effective.
100% effective. Right. Right. And and here's the thing. I mean, I would imagine their goal isn't even to have the child have conversations with the abusive parent or smiling pictures. It's to get as much money as they possibly can. And then they're deemed, better bonded.
Right. And these people, these reunification camp owners, remain in full control of the case, usually for a year. So everybody is under their guidance and rules. And if you step out of line, it all starts over again. Kids have been brought back to the camp if they are found to be out of compliance. I know Maya Lang in California, she had asked to speak to her court-appointed attorney, and that was deemed to be not in compliance. And so she was taken back to the camp as a way to intimidate her and threaten her. It's truly sick what is happening.
So before we kind of wrap up, because I always want to end with, this is such a heavy topic. And so I want to make sure that we end on what can people do, what gives people hope, what are some things that parents, going through this can do to prep themselves for battle, because essentially that's what this is. But before we do that, if you could talk a little bit about what you've been doing behind the scenes and not just behind the scenes, very openly, to combat these reunification camps and to fix this unbelievably broken system.
So at the federal level, Caden's Law was passed a couple of years ago, and that really calls for a ban on reunification camps. Now it's up to each state individually, because each state is in charge of its own family court system. They have to pass these laws. And so there's variations of it. Pennsylvania and Utah passed Caden's Law in its entire package as it was passed federally. In California, we successfully passed Pinky's Law, which calls for a ban. It's not a ban shutting the camps down, but it prohibits judges from ordering kids into these camps. So it's a roundabout way to stop it. Arizona just passed a similar calling for no more reunification camps, and Tennessee was just successful in their bid. They have Abriel's Law, which is an amazing package of child safety laws. And so it's really, we're through One Mom's Battle, my organization. We invite people to join our state chapters. That's where a lot of movement is taking place, trying to get people mobilized state by state to take these laws that have already been written and then implement them through their states.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you've done the most incredible work, and like I said, you're saving lives. You really are saving lives, truly. So thank you so much for everything you do. I know you're not doing it for credit, but I feel that credit is due. So you're unbelievable. You really are. And you are fearless, and you're a force. You're just an absolute force. So before we go, like I said, this is such a heavy topic. So what can people who are listening, who are in this situation, or who are about to enter this situation, or are staying because they're petrified of the situation, what are some things that people can do to empower themselves, to prep themselves, just things that in retrospect you wish you had known or had done, or things that you've learned that can help?
Connect with people in your state who are also navigating this, because you have to educate yourself on your local court system, which professionals to stay away from. You can conflict them out. You can go meet with someone who is horribly corrupt under the guise of wanting, to possibly hire that person, just so the other side cannot. Because once you are connected to one of these people, I it's predictable where the case is going to go. So education is power, really getting to know all of these players in the system and who the good ones are and who you need to gravitate towards. Document everything. That was the piece of advice I was given very early on, and the one I'm most grateful for. And a lot of people throw rocks and say, I'm documenting, nothing is helping, no one's listening. I will tell you, for me, it wasn't until year 6 that someone finally was appointed to my case who was a good person and who did go through everything. But even with that, 99% of what I've documented has never been seen by anyone. But that 1% saved my children, and we do have a happy ending and a success story. I terminated parental rights, which is almost unheard of. So stay the course. You have to be strategic. Unfortunately, emotions can really, we're in a system that is ill-equipped and uneducated on victim-perpetrator behavior. And so how we show up, it does matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where can people find you and the amazing resources that you have?
One Mom's Battle is the source of everything, onemomsbattle.com. You can connect with our chapters, you can online courses, my books, anything that you need will be there.
And really quickly, because I'm so happy that you did this, can you tell us about your children's book?
Yes, it is called, I actually have one right here. It's called Everyone is Beautiful.
I love it.
It's my new children's book, and I'll give you a quick nutshell of it. So when my daughter was little, it was really important to me that she appreciated the differences in people. And I was married to someone highly narcissistic who criticized people for their looks, their weight, all of the things. And so I kind of went into overdrive as a parent trying to correct that. And one day, we were in a store checking out, and I had my 2-year-old on my hip, and the cashier was a lady who looked very different than us. And my 2-year-old points at her, and my heart sank because I thought, I have no idea what's going to come out of her mouth. And she said, Mom, she is beautiful. And the lady burst out into tears and said, thank you so much. And so I called my aunt, who was like my mother figure, and told her. And she said, we have to write a book about this. And my aunt passed away a couple of years ago, and I vowed to take this to its final stage, and we just published. So
that's amazing. And I'm assuming people can get it on Amazon, wherever books are. And okay, awesome. Tina, this was so good. You are such a wealth of information. And like I said, you are just a badass. You really are. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, and people are going to get so much from this. So hopefully we can do this again.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah. Oh, it was so good to see you, and we will definitely speak soon. All right, everybody, have a great day, and we will talk next time. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Z, and I am thrilled to announce the launch of my summer support series, Narcissistic Abuse Live Virtual Support Group. This is for those who are either currently experiencing narcissistic abuse or who have experienced narcissistic abuse in relationships of all kinds. You can register for the support group series on my website, drjamiezuckerman.com, and click the Workshops tab and scroll until you see Summer Support Series Live Virtual Support Group. This is a 4-session support group. Each group is an hour long from July 8th, July 15th, July 22nd, and July 29th, Mondays, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, to register and to get more info, head to my website, drjamiezuckerman.com, click on the Workshops tab, or if you have any questions or need additional information, please email info@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's info@drjamiezuckerman.com. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.